Hello, my name is Virgil, and this is Literally Books. Today, I want to talk about John Christopher's The Tripod Trilogy, or series. I'm not sure which one they. I don't know what people call it anymore, or ever. Anyways, and I'm going to talk about that. Maybe I'm going to do a little bit of a sort of like catch up too. I'm just going to kind of sprinkle that in. This book is part of the Barlowe's Guide Summer Reading Challenge Explosion. You don't have to explode to do it. Essentially, the challenge is to sort of read all the books that are featured in Wayne Douglas Barlowe's 70s originally printed Barlowe's Guide to Extraterrestrials. And if you're interested in what's going on with the Barlowe's Guide, I did a sort of redux video on that a few months ago that I'm much happier with than my original, but I left the original up. So the one that says redux, that's the most recent. I guess I could put they had the ability to put little cards and stuff, or what I think they call it a card. I'll do that, and I'll put it in one of those areas. I never get my left and right correct when looking at the camera. John Christopher's Tripod series. No, actually, I started reading this a long time ago. I actually read the first book quite a while ago, maybe 11 years or 12 years ago, probably longer ago than that. And I kind of bounced on it, kind of like, I wasn't really crazy about it. I don't really know why. It could have been a number of things. It could have been that it was an audiobook and I didn't like the reading. It could have been that. Though usually the narration in an audiobook is very rarely, it takes a lot for something like that to really turn me off on a book. It might make the experience maybe not ideal, but I can generally kind of do some separation there. I mean, especially good reading matters. One that comes to mind was the Castle on Toronto. That reading by Tony, is it right? Tony something? Oh, I don't remember. But the reading there was a very classic voice actor, and it was just a gorgeous like pairing. And I've read other books too before where it's just like, I've actually had audiobooks where I'm like, I can't actually read this book because I want to, but this narration is terrible. And the other reason it might have been, apart from the narration, and which is probably more likely, is it was a young adult. And sometimes young adult does not strike me well. In fact, it's probably part of it because I think going into that read, I didn't know that it was a young adult book. I didn't know that it was a young adult book. And that really kind of turned me off to it. I felt like it was very juvenile, which it is because it's written for juvenile. Juvenile family, that's the definition of it. But going back and rereading all three of the books all at once in a row, I changed my mind. It's actually pretty great. I have one minor complaint. I'm just going to get it out of the way right away. It's a boys' adventure series, right? The three books, they're not very big. I'll show them to you in a second. They're not very big, but they're written for... they're boys' adventures, right? I mean, it's sort of take like a sci-fi slant on the Hardy Boys. It doesn't read anything like that, but you can sort of say like that's the demographic that it's going after, right? Young boys, probably from like 9-ish, maybe, or a little older, up to like maybe even up into like like 19 or something, or 20. I think you could still enjoy something like this. I think that it's the same reading levelship that you would get from like Lloyd Alexander's like Black Cauldron and stuff, which I love. So it's that same, to me, it's like the same level. I think that the Black Cauldron transcends the genre in a lot of ways. I think it's a really amazing story. And if you like Welsh myth, if you like traditional fantasy, I think that the Black Cauldron series, which is not called that, it's called the Pryden Chronicles. I always get that name messed up. But Lloyd Alexander's series, The Black Cauldron, is the second book. It's the one that Disney made a movie out of and kind of like bastardized the first two books, I think. Is really a wonderful fantasy series. Really, really, really wonderful. And Lloyd Alexander in general is a really good writer. Kind of underappreciated, I guess, sadly. John Christopher's Tripod series is very similar in that it, whereas, well, I should say that the Pryden Chronicles, the Lloyd Alexander's books, are not as heavily boys' adventure as these are. And the reason I bring up their boys' adventure, it's taking a long time to get there, is that there is almost zero female characters. In fact, I'm going to show you the cover to what I guess is probably I think it's the third book, right? So this is the third book in the series. Is that right? This is very exciting. It's real exciting if I... No, this is not even the... It's a boy's adventure. And what I mean by that is that there is almost no female characters in the entire trilogy. There just isn't. I think there's one female character in the first book who has a minorish role, and you kind of think maybe for a little while that character is going to persist. No. And kind of a bit of like in the second book, there's a bit of a shock or sort of, kind of like a gasp type moment that happens in the second book that maybe you were expecting. I think you kind of gets led up to, and you kind of know it's going to happen before it happens, and you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, not great. But other than that, like literally that one female character in this whole series, which takes place over multiple years, over many different like adventures, so to speak, there is like no other female characters at all. At all. Like all the people who organized the resistance against the tripods, I'll get to what the book's about in a second, all men or boys. That's it. I mean, I don't think there's any girls mentioned at all. Girls or women or mother. I mean, I think the main character mentions his mother, but that's another thing. So that to me is kind of unfortunate because otherwise it's a really great book. Really, really, really great. And it's just kind of like, what a bummer. This kind of like such a, boys only club type stuff. Even knowing that this is a boys adventure story and that the main character, that it's written for young boys, or just boys in general, up to like late teens, and that's the market, and that they want to have young men having the adventure, and young men want to read about young men having the adventure. That's fine, but even in like the sort of like the resistance, like the people who are just sort of like there and that they're interacting with, you just don't even hear about any female characters. Like there's not even like women in the camp. Almost, you would think. You'd almost think that there are no women in this world, because of how low a presence that they have. I don't think it's a problem. It's not that female characters are maligned exactly, but they just don't have a presence. They're just not there, period. 3 books. I'm getting ahead of myself. The White Mountains, the City of Gold, and gosh dang it, I can't remember the name of the third book, The Pool of Fire. In the introduction to the second book, John Christopher acknowledges that a big part of his inspiration was H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. And that's what the tripods essentially sort of are, very similar to. In fact, he talks about how he wrote the first book, The White Mountain, without really any sense of what the tripods were, other than this sort of this large metal tripod that would sort of like, that oppresses humanity. So the background of the story is, the setting is England, and you get the impression that it's sort of like pseudo-medieval England, okay? Except that all these little towns and villages are sort of under the control of these tripods, these giant, I want to say 50-foot, that's probably gives you a good example of what they are, but these giant tripods on these 3 legs that essentially kind of look over humanity. They don't necessarily enslave them. It's not like it's nothing that grim, but everyone, once they're of age, once they reach a certain age, they are capped, which means that they are a sort of like a metallic tentacle comes down and wraps around them, and they're pulled up inside of the tripod, and I think their head is shaved before, and they come back, and there's this sort of metal mesh that gets sort of surgically installed on top of their skull, and sort of like their skin grows into it. So like once you have one, there's really nothing you can do. Once you've got it installed, you can't really take it off, at least not with the technology that the people in this time period have. Follows Will, and he and his best friend are almost of age. His best friend, I think, becomes of age and gets capped, and then he notices that his friend's disposition changes after he's capped. And the only thing that what capping seems to do is just sort of make the people complacent, and to say, oh yeah, we got to obey the tripods, we got to do what they want. And it's not a very demanding or bad life. It's sort of pastoral in a sense, right? But Will notices that his friend, his disposition changes. He just isn't. There is a bunch of concern that Will and his friend had about being capped, and his friend comes back and he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." And he's like, "Well, what happened?" And he's like, "Well, don't worry about it." And I don't even know if his friend or anybody who's capped really remembers what happens. I think they just know that they got capped, and they're sort of like, "Well, you don't need to question it. It's not a big deal." Right? Very much a like mind control sort of body snatching sort of thing almost, right? And here's the first book of the White Mountains. Here's what the cover looks like, and this is one interpretation of what the tripods could look like. Not bad. It's not quite. I envision them being a little bit more simplistic, a little bit more H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds ish, but you never see what's in the tripods, especially not in the first book. It's just the tripods. And like I said, John Christopher, when he wrote this, he said he wrote the book kind of as a one-off. He's like, "Oh, you should write a young adult book." And he's like, "I never really took the genre seriously." And then my editor was like, "You should do this or something." And he's like, "Okay, fine." So we did it. And then like, "Oh, it was really popular. You should write a sequel." And he's sort of like, "Well, I don't really even know what what I was going to do with it. I don't even know what's in a tripod." So this is kind of funny. And so I think that he said he realized that he was borrowing from Wells, that he had that in his head. I envision the tripods in this book being a little more simplistic, but you don't really ever see anything but the tripods themselves. And so what happens is that Will, in the first book, after his friend is capped and he sees the change in his friend, he's really kind of like not excited about being capped, but he doesn't really know what to do about it. So like a vagrant comes through town, and I can't remember what they call the vagrants in the book, but that's not important. This vagrant comes through, and he's sort of like acting a little crazy, and then Will talks about how sometimes when someone's capped, they don't take to it. Like there's a very small chance that when you're capped that you'll kind of like get messed up in the head, and you're just kind of be messed up for life. And these people who kind of become these vagrants are sort of like wander around from town to town, and people kind of like give them food and like and make sure that they can subsist. They don't really necessarily. They might even sort of like, I don't know, like take them in like a barn or something like that. But they don't really like socialize with them per se. They're just sort of like, well, these people, something unfortunate happened to them, so we'll kind of like, they're kind of like semi-homeless, and like people have this sort of like the culture is to sort of like make sure these people don't starve or die of exposure, but also not to like take them into their home and make them live with them. And usually these vagrants don't really want to do that anyways. They want to wander around, right? So Will encounters this vagrant, and he's sort of like, "Oh, this guy's a little strange." And the guy's sort of like singing bits of song and stuff like that. Will thinks it's unusual, and somehow in a conversation, Will finds out that this man is not actually a true vagrant. He's not actually sort of driven insane by a poorly done capping. He's actually a representative of sort of a resistance. And the cap that he wears, because you can always sort of see the mesh under a person's hair. The cap that he wears is actually like from a dead man, and that he sort of took this cap, like skinned it or whatever, cleaned it up, and like puts it on himself with like sort of like almost like a wig, and he wears that to give the impression that he's capped, but he really isn't. And he talks about how the capping changes you, which is something that Will already sort of suspected or knew, and that if Will's interested, there's a place where those who don't want to people who don't want to be capped, if you want to join this resistance, you can come to the White Mountain, and you can join us, and we're fighting against the tripods, because it's not right. They're controlling us. We don't have real freedom of thought, and you can come and join the resistance. This vagrant says, like, "I can't take you there. Like, you have to do it on your own. Here's how," I think he describes how to find it to him, but he won't write. I don't think he writes it down. I think he describes how to do it. So Will runs away. Now, Will had also had a bunch of interaction with sort of like a bully character that who was kind of like beating him up, and he really hated. And then this kid's parents die, and so then he's sort of like a cousin or something. So he comes to live with Will and his family, and Will like hates it. Will runs away. This kid sees Will running away and is like, "You need to take me with you too. I don't want to be there." And Will's like, "God, I hate this guy," but he's like, "If you don't take me with you, then I'm going to tell them where you went." And so Will's like, "Okay, well, this is what I'm doing, and you want to join us, because this other kid is not capped either yet." He isn't of age. I want to say they cap you at 11 or 12, something like that. It's 11, 12, maybe 13, somewhere right in there. So they run away. And then they have some sort of adventures. They do, they encounter another character, Beanpole, and I cannot remember, unfortunately, the bully kid, I can't remember his name. And, he kind of plays a minor role. It's like his role is really to sort of be like this sort of tension in the beginning of the book, right? Between Will, who's like, sort of like, I want to go do this thing, and this is my adventure, and then he's like, gosh, this kid that I hate is coming with me. But that kid doesn't really have much of a role outside of this book. He's still there, but his role is very minor comparatively. Beanpole, this other character that Will meets, is important. Beanpole is they kind of go to this, it's not described, but basically it's France, right? And that's where they meet and take up Beanpole, who also doesn't want to be capped. And Beanpole's very analytical and intelligent, and he's very good at figuring things out. So the three of them have adventures to get to this White Mountain, right? That's the first book, and they eventually, at the end of the book, get there. In the second book, we see Will, and I want to say the character's name is Hans, but I can't remember if that's exactly. But it's a character who's obviously this boy who's of Germanic descent, who's also at the White Mountain. And they go, and they're going to invade the Tripod City, right? They're going to go to this big city, the city of gold and what's it called? City of gold and lead, right? They're going to go to that city and invade that city, or not invade it, but like penetrate the city and sort of like discover what the Tripod's weaknesses are, and sort of like to get an inside track, because they know, I think they've received a transmission, or they know, no, they don't know that yet, because they're trying to mount this resistance against them. And they're trying to figure out, like, what we need something, because there's not a lot of humans who aren't capped, especially adult humans. There's not very many, and we don't want to fight other humans and kill them, but we need to get out from underneath this tripod control. So sort of there's these games. There's sort of like an Olympic type game type thing that is had, and the winners are selected to go to the tripod, like, major city where the tripods themselves live, sort of in this dome. The winners get to go there and serve the tripods into this dome, right? So those characters go, and they're able to get in, right? Obviously, I mean, I'm not spoiling anything there. I mean, you knew when I said it was probably going to happen. At least I would hope so. So there's that. Like I said, there is a sort of a shocking moment that happens in the city with relation to a female character from this first book, that Will had an interest in, and who she, I don't want to give that away, but there's an interest there, and there's sort of a shocking moment that happens in the second book in relation to that character, that was just sort of like, oh my gosh, it is kind of like, ooh, kind of like a gut punch. And then it's also sort of, in addition to that, kind of unfortunate, because it was really the only female character in these three books. Like, honestly, like, probably the only, I would say almost the only named character, but I think Will's mother might get named, and I know that this girl, whose name eludes me, her mother is named. But apart from that, this girl's the only one who has any significant dialogue in any way, shape, or form in the first book, and that's it. Ugh. But and then the third book features sort of, I don't want to reveal too much of the story. The third book kind of like takes the discoveries that happen in the second book and sort of leads them to the logical conclusion. Actually, really a good series, a really good, fun adventure series. Like I said, when I first read the White Mountain, I just kind of bounced on it. I just kind of like, oh, this isn't very good. So I wasn't very excited to come back to it. But I'm like, I need to read this because of sort of the obligation I had. And it kind of shows that maybe sometimes you can read something that could be good, something that you could really like, but you read it at the wrong time, or you read it with the wrong first impression. And because of that, you can really sort of get to, kind of like make a judgment about a book, and then you kind of live with this judgment, and like you sort of internalize it and say, well, that book isn't any good because I read it this time and I didn't like it. And it's really more some sort of internal bias that you had. So I definitely had a bias against this book that this reread destroyed. And I really, really enjoy this book. I think it would be a really great book for kids in general. It's a little unfortunate, like I said, there's not really any female characters, but female characters are also not maligned in this book. There's not a lot of, I don't think there's a lot of sexist sort of perceptions in this book. So I would probably give this to one of my daughters to read if they would actually read it. Which sometimes they will read, but I can't guarantee that they'll read anything I give them. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, Dad, I'll read that. No, they don't read it. Isn't that going to happen? I don't want to talk too much more about this series only because it's not that I think that I don't want to spoil it, and I think that saying too much could spoil the book, and I don't really want to spoil it for you. But I do think it's really fun. You should be able to pick those books up fairly inexpensively. I think I looked on Amazon. I think you can get the trilogy. It's like a box set. Very inexpensive. It's really, really worth it. It really is. The books are not very long. Like I said, this is White Mountain, so this is like a trade paperback, and it's only, in this decent print size, 214 pages. I think the audiobook was like 6 hours, and that's always a hard thing for me too. When I see an audiobook that's like under 7 hours, I'm always like, ooh. Then it's like, man, that's a whole credit, or it's full price for that. And I think that the Tripod series came on sale on Audible. I'm like, I'm just going to buy them all right now, because when else are they going to go on sale? Who knows? So just get them all and read them all in one go, and that was great. And in addition to that, I sort of read War of the Worlds. I think I read it right after this. I'm pretty sure I read it right after. I read it very close to it. I don't think I read it before. I think I read it right after, because I read this Tripods book actually before I read Body Snatchers and reread Puppet Masters. So I think, I can't remember in my reading habit if it was, and this happened a little while ago. The book the video I did on segue. The video I did on Invasion of the Body Snatchers and the Puppet Masters. That video came out about a month after I actually taped it. Yeah, so and the little video I did at the beginning of the summer, here's some graphic novels. That video is 2 weeks after I recorded. I think that came out 2 weeks after I recorded the video for the Body Snatchers, and so in the Body Snatcher video I made was 2 weeks after the read. So I don't know, and so it goes way back. So this is all stuff. So I'm doing all this from memory, but that's okay. This is old information. That was a long way for me to say this is old information. I read this a while ago, but I read War of the Worlds too, and that was based on. It's something that I didn't have much interest in reading exactly. Not that I had a problem with it, but it wasn't really excited about the read. And the reason I read it specifically, not just because it's important to sort of have a basis to know where this series comes from, but really because another channel, Bookpilled, I cannot remember how to say it. It's another YouTube channel. A guy does he does a lot of science fiction, classic science fiction reads and talks about them. A really, really good channel. Is another channel that I really like, but I don't watch, and in part because, like I said in the last video I did, that maybe you wouldn't watch because of the annoying cicada noise that was going on outside. But I think I did okay with it. It was just sort of a one-off. I need to make a video to get started again. So, anyways, I talked about how I don't really watch the content that I tend to make. I don't really watch BookTube. It's just not a thing that I really do. I don't have a problem with BookTube. It's just not a resource. I really don't watch it. Usually if I watch it, it's because I'm trying to understand what BookTube videos look like and how the people do the reviews, to kind of understand it, to see what I'm doing, if it falls in line with that, or if it's different, and if it's different, why am I doing it different? So that's kind of why I would watch it. But now his channel I actually liked a lot, Bookpop. I really hope I'm saying it right. I'll put a thing so that I get it, so that even if I can't say it, that you can read it and say, okay, he doesn't know how to talk. But I just stopped watching his stuff only because he was talking about a lot of science fiction books that I either have read and would like to talk about, or that I want to read and talk about. And I was concerned that I was going to sort of get those thoughts, I was going to sort of internalize what he said and put it in my head, and then I really wouldn't have. I'd just be sort of regurgitating what somebody else said, and I didn't want to do that. So I sort of said, man, I'm gonna have to stop watching this guy's stuff, because I was concerned that about my own integrity to review and talk about stuff if I watched too much. Maybe, and not that I can't separate it, but it just sort of felt I'm just gonna, I haven't been doing this very long, and I still feel like I'm sort of finding my way every single time I make a video. But I just felt I'm going to stop watching this. But I would highly recommend the channel. Really, really great if you like classic science fiction. Really, really great channel. But he talked about War of the Worlds, and he talked about how it was kind of surprising how good it was, and how it did things that it wasn't very much like the sort of Orson Welles sort of and presentation that we have, or like those movies around it. It isn't exactly like those. So I read it, and yeah, actually it isn't. And surprisingly, it's pretty, I want to say gruesome. It's pretty, in a lot of ways, it's kind of intense. I thought it was I think it's worth reading, honestly, especially if you're going to read the Tripod series. You should go ahead and pick up War of the Worlds too. You should totally be able to find War of the Worlds either for free or super cheap. I mean, it's just how it should just be that way. And I was kind of surprised at how sort of intense the action got, or sort of like how aggressive the Martians were, and also just sort of the very apocalyptic feel in that book. It's sort of a very interesting read. I think it's worth your time to read. And so that was a good pairing to go with this. So I would definitely recommend War of the Worlds, even if I wouldn't say that I loved it, but I liked it. And I think, like I said, and it's a great intro to go into this Tripod series, which I think is really great, especially if you are into young adult fiction. I think you'll like it. It really feels like it's ready for a really well-produced TV or movie series, and I think it can be very successful. The Tripod series is The White Mountains. I'm gonna make sure I get it right, because it could be that I misspoke. The 3 books in the series, John Christopher is the writer. The 3 books in the series are The White Mountains, The City of Gold and Lead, and The Pool of Fire. And I do not have anything ready for the I don't even have the book down here, for the Masters, which is the entry in Barlowe's guide. So do I want to make a separate video? Not really. I will put the image up here. And I'm going to talk from memory about the Masters. Actually, you know what? Let me take that back. I'm not going to show you the Masters. And the reason I'm not going to show you them is because there's some suspense in White Mountain about what is going on with these tripods. Are these tripods empty? Is there something in them? And I think that I don't want to spoil that mystery. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to say that I'm going to withhold this one. I think this is maybe the only time I'll do this, but I'm going to withhold that image, which you can totally search up very easily and discover it if you really want to do it. You can type in John Christopher, the Tripod series, The Masters, and you'll probably come up with Barlowe's guide illustration of the Masters. And I think that Christopher talks about in the introduction to the second book. I don't know if it's in the actual book. It was in the audiobook, which makes the audiobook worthwhile to me. But he talks about in the introduction to that second book, The City of Gold and Lead, about how he sort of had to work out this alien and how they worked and how tripods made sense, right? So I think he even said he talked to he corresponded with Arthur C. Clarke, I want to say, to kind of figure out how that would work and how tripods could work. So kind of an interesting little tidbit. And in that sense, I think those introductions are really worth it, which is why I think those, I don't know, I got it from Audible, so I don't know if those are Audible exclusives. I'll try to find out and put some information up on here, although I don't want to do a lot of that because it really slows down my ability to make these videos. But I will put it out there anyways. So there's those books. Now I'm going to go ahead and just sort of roll right into just doing a little bit of, I don't want to say upkeep, but just sort of like, I don't know, just kind of like a little extra at the end of this thing, and because I want to sort of get this stuff out. So Half Price Books had a sale this past weekend. Obviously, my wife made the mistake of telling me, and I was like, I'm not going to go there. And then, I don't need any more books. And I went there, and they had, for some reason, one near us had a particularly good selection. And I was like pained as I kept putting these books in the basket going, I don't need to get this one too. Yes, just so I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff I found that I thought was pretty cool. I got the sequel to Ice Rigger, which Ice Rigger is a Barlowe's Guide book, and by Alan Dean Foster. And I got the sequel to it, which is the Mission to Molokin. Mission to Molokin. So I was able to pick that up. I found that was I think it was like $2. $2 actually, but with 20% off. So it was less than $2, which makes it $1.60. So that was cool. I was excited about that. Got a couple Edgar Rice Burroughs books. The Mastermind of Mars. I used to have this book when I was much younger, and I don't remember much about it, but I do want to get back and read all the John Carters at some point. And so this, I think I've got a hardback book somewhere that has like the first 5 books in it, and I'm like, okay, so this is book 6. I'm like, sure, you know what? It was a good price, and I really love the Michael Whelan. I think these are Michael Whelan covers. So great find for me. And then also the 10th book, Lana of Gathel. Why did they? Lana of Gathel. Also book 10 in the John Carter series. So excited to read that. John Carter, the Martian, I don't know, the Martian, whatever they call it. I don't know what they call it. They call it a bunch of different things. I don't care what they call it, honestly. It's what I call it. When I did the my Chalkers Exiles and Midnight at the Well of Souls review, I wanted to get a certain copy of the of Exiles, especially because it had a really great cover, and I looked at pricing for this version of the cover. The cover's by Clyde Caldwell, I think, and it was like stupid money. It went like $20. I think I said that in that view. It's like $20 for this book, and I'm like, oh no, $5 plus 20% off. So good find, and it was perfect. It was better. It was probably just about as good quality as the other one. And then they had the 3rd book. I'm pulling the stickers off. I'm sorry. And okay, fine. I won't pull the sticker off because it's taking forever. And then the this one was $3.99 for the 3rd book, The Quest for the Well of Souls. They didn't have Midnight at the Well of Souls with these covers, so I'll have to look for that. Maybe I don't have that, but so I'll probably have to get that at some point. Well, whatever. Another Alan Dean Foster, Crystal Tears, which I think is part of another series. I was interested in reading this, and I guess actually I do have a This is a slight thing to say. Oh, you know what? Too many things at once. And there was a thing too with Alan Dean Foster. Like I said, he's one of his Icebreaker is a book I need to read for Barlow's Guide. And there's also I got kind of interested in his sort of movie interpretations, his sort of movie novelizations, and there's one of his that he wrote that you cannot buy anymore. I don't know if it's the only one, but it's one that is not reprinted, and that is his novelization of the movie The Thing. It's kind of a collector's item, and my brother-in-law was interested in it, and I thought, okay, I'd kind of like to read that and compare it to the original short story novella that John Campbell wrote, Who Goes There, which I did. And I will talk, because Who Goes There is also Barlow's Guide. So I did that. I read Who Goes There, and I also read Alan Dean Foster's novelization of the movie from the screenplay of John Carpenter's The Thing. That was actually really good. I do want to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it here. I'll talk about Who Goes There, and then I'll talk about that book. I read it and meant to make a video, didn't make a video right away. I went ahead and gifted that to my brother-in-law, and sort of like, hey, he's like, here, it's like a back and forth thing, right? And I thought it was kind of a cool thing. I wanted to read it, and I'm like, well, this is cool. I can read this and then talk about it, but I won't have the book to hold up, which is unfortunate, but it's okay. But you can trust me, I read it. I mean, I don't know why I would lie about it. It seems kind of silly, but it was actually kind of cool, and I do want to talk about that maybe next time. Those Clyde Caldwell covers for the Jack Chalker series, the Exiles and Quest for the Lost Souls, that was cool to get those 2 covers. That was exciting. And then I did find one book that was kind of like, ooh, that's pretty cool, and I don't know that I needed to get it. I certainly didn't need to get it. Need is a weird word. But I was able to find Gene Wolfe's paperback copy of Gene Wolfe's The Fifth Head of Cerberus, which was cool. Big Gene Wolfe fan. $10 is a little high for a paperback book, even though I already have the book. Don't ask me why I got this. And I'm not exactly a book collector, but I do a little bit of that for Gene Wolfe. For Gene Wolfe and a couple of the writers I really like, I'll pay a little extra to a point. And this one with 20% off, I'm like $8. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll pay $8. That's fine. And it's a pretty nice copy. So Gene Wolfe's The Fifth Head of Cerberus. I guess I'll have to read this and talk about it since I'm holding it up. Anyways, but I have another Gene Wolfe I have to talk about first, which is The Borrowed Man. Do I have that on my list of? Yes, I do have that on my list of books to talk about. Cool. So, anyhow, I don't know how much of this is going to stay in here. And I also found, I think a while back, I talked about a Sean Stewart book. I don't remember what it was, and I said, "Oh, I used to have that book, Resurrection Man. I'll reread it." Well, I have that book, Resurrection Man. I have to reread it. Well, I didn't have that book. It somehow disappeared, but I was able to find it again for $2, and I was like, right on. And I remember this book being pretty cool, and it was like stupid money on eBay to find it, which is dumb. It's, it's like anyways, those kind of dumb. And they don't. Slight final segue, I guess. We went to the library sale. The area, the city we live in, will have the library puts on a sale once a year. And we went there. Admittedly, we went the last day, but it was like super picked over. Like they had like a science fiction and fantasy, like big long table set up. There was literally maybe 100 books there, and that was it. I mean, we're talking these tables for like, there's like 10 tables, right? 100. It was like nothing. There was like nothing there. Super picked over, and I was a little annoyed too that people were like had their phones and they had like a camera on their phone and they're like scan the book and they'd be like, and they'd be like, just sort of to see how much the book is worth, and then they're going to buy it like that. And I was just like, I understand that market exists, and from the library standpoint, cool, we're making money on it. We don't have time to sell this on eBay, or the inclination to. We're just trying to make money for the public library and get going. I don't know why. It really irritated me. It really shouldn't have, but I just was like not feeling good energy about that. Kind of turned me off to it. But wife did point out that if we do the Friends of the Library membership, which is not very expensive at all, then we can go on like the first day. They do like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If you're a friend of the library, if you pay a little bit, then you get a couple other benefits, and one of the benefits you get is that you get to go on the first day and look around. I'm like, maybe that'd be worth it. So next year, I guess I said next year we should do that. So maybe next year. It's a little tidbit, but maybe I probably shouldn't have been so annoyed by that, but it just felt like you're buying, like I'm here, and most of the people I felt like who were there to see if they could find a cool book to read. And there was a very small selection of people there who were just like, I'm just buying these books up to sell them at a higher price on eBay or wherever, or on Amazon, more likely. And I was just kind of thought, didn't make me feel good. I did not feel good energy about that. I got so many books piled up in front of me now, you can't even see. John Christopher's the Tripod series, great stuff. War of the Worlds is a good pairing with that. I would recommend it. I do need to do a little Barlowe's video there where I kind of show what I've read and everything. I do have that like a spreadsheet built up of that. I just haven't cleaned it up for TV. It doesn't really need all that, but I'll do that soon. Maybe when I think I have another. When I do the Who Goes There video, I'll probably I'll try and do those two things at the exact same time, and then I can have it up, and that could be a resource if you're trying to see what's going on. I'm trying to do that. I have to make sure my spelling is good. Make sure everything's correct and there, and then put that up, and so that it can be a resource if you're interested in trying to find all those books. It can help you to sort of determine what formats the books are available in, when the book was published, that kind of stuff. Just the titles of the book, and if it's part of a series or not, all that kind of stuff that I can find. I think I have ownership of a decent selection of those books, but not all. There's a couple of them that are kind of hard to find. So I guess I'll have to get into that. That'll be it'd probably be its own video talking about doing that sort of like the pairing with the challenge itself is sort of like resources for that. That was it. My name is Virgil. This has been Literally Books. I have too many damn books in front of me right now. It's a terrible thing to say. Thanks for watching. More stuff coming up soon. Just trying to get this list. Like I said I had 13. That was incorrect. I don't care. Thank you for watching. This will be edited down. Thank you for watching. My name is Virgil. This was Literally Books. It is still Literally Books, but it was because this is the end of the video. Rambling exit. Be good out there. Read books. Don't scam people. Bye.